As we continue with Tautog, I asked you on Instagram to send in your Tog related questions. And in this video, we're going to answer them. Let's get into it. In this video, we're going to be bouncing back and forth between fishing footage and the question answering. So let's start with the question. The first question is, are Tog jigs actually worth it? This is definitely a matter of preference, but to me, my answer is yes. I think if you enjoy light tackle fishing, more bite sensitivity, and more fun fights, then jigs are a great method of tog fishing. From an anecdotal technical perspective, I also feel like tog jigs seem to snag less, since there's less terminal tackle to be caught in the rocks. Sometimes the conditions aren't right for tog jigging, but if they are, have some on hand to try out. You might find yourself enjoying a different fishing method. So I'm out here trying for some tog. We got the jig on there, we got a 1/2 ounce jig. And we're gonna see what we can get into. All right, we've got some green crab here. We're gonna do the usual. You string it through one of the back legs and then push the hook through and out another leg socket. All right, so dropping in close to this wall is where I seem to be getting the most bites, but they're all very small bites, nothing substantial. So it's probably just a lot of really small fish swiping at the jig. They sure are stealing my crabs and doing a good job of it. All right, it's a nice one to start the day. It's probably like a 10, 11 inch. All right, there he goes. All right, here we go. Here's another one. How to not miss the hook set and keep your bait on the jig. Missing your hook set is one of the most frustrating parts of tog fishing. You're gonna swing and miss a ton, but keying in on those heavier bites and pulls and practicing detecting when to set the hook is the best way to reduce the amount of whiffs. As always, practice makes perfect. As for keeping the bait on the hook, I do find that green crabs stay on the hook a little better. When you hook them, make sure you're putting the hook through one of the leg sockets and then out another. The bait will last longer this way, and it'll be harder for the fish to rip the bait off the hook without eating through it first. So I'm kind of trying to keep my jig out of this current right here, because it just flows down. So there's this little slack area right here, and that's really where I'm getting all most of my bites. So I'm just tossing as close as possible to this bulkhead, letting it sink, and then those bites are pretty much automatic. Oh no. Oh, that's a decent one. This towel's dampened, which makes it easier to hold the fish and reduces harm to the fish's slime coating. Fish right here. Too small though, going back. Most inlets generally have a lot of weeds, so you're gonna want to make sure that you keep cleaning off your jig, because you may be getting bites and then bites and then bites and then they just stop all of a sudden, but you pull it up and you still got your crab there, but there's a ton of weeds on it. That's usually why the bite might stop. So make sure you're keeping that jig clean while you're fishing. Well, I wasn't too happy with how the bite was going there, so we're gonna go back out to the rocks and try to see if we can get on some more fish over there. So I'll catch you out there. How to pick your days, times, tides for best production. Tog bite best during the day, and the bite is really slow when the sun is down. With that said, it's best to turn your attention to the tide and the current. If you can time getting to the jetty a little bit before peak high tide, that would be optimal. As the tide begins to slow and become more slack at the peak, the tog have to work less to fight the current for food, and those bigger fish may become more active. On top of that, you'll be able to go lighter with your jigs and your rigs and keep it on the bottom. However, my advice, as always, is to fish when you can. Sometimes you can try to line everything up perfectly, but you'll catch your best, biggest fish during the most unsuspecting of times. All right, we are back out on the rocks. Hopefully we can get, if not some better fish, some more fish. So we'll see. Throwing the jig in the crab. Let's get back to it. There's a nice little pocket between these 4, I think, rocks out there. So hopefully there's some fish sitting in there. Oh yeah, already getting bites. Feels like a good one. Yeah. It's definitely a pretty good fish. Wouldn't say a keeper, but that's a good start. All right, 14-incher right here. So he's got to go back. Limit's 15. Maybe we'll get on one.
When to set the hook. After your rig or jig hits the bottom, you'll start to feel little scrapes or taps. This is either little fish chipping away at the bait or fish swiping at it. When you feel a pull or heavier thud, this is when the fish have the bait in their mouth and are swimming away with it. This is when you'll quickly set the hook and then fight the fish.
All right. Another decent fish. Pretty good fight. Back in. Both of those fish tried to pull me down into the rocks, so my leader line is pretty chewed up. So I am going to replace this. You don't want to have a chewed up leader line. That's how you lose a fish. So make sure you're always checking it and replacing it as necessary. After I changed out my leader, I actually switched to a 3/4 ounce jig. I do want it to hold a little better on the bottom. The half ounce was floating a little too much for me, so we're gonna see if this holds better.
Any tips for avoiding snags, or what to do when snagged for limiting line going in the ocean? Unfortunately, snagging is part of the game when it comes to tog fishing, and sometimes the snaggier the area, the better the fishing. To try and avoid snagging, first, try and stay as vertical as possible with the rig or the jig. Second, when your rig or jig hits bottom, make sure you keep it still. And third, if you miss a hook set, bring your rig or jig all the way out of the water before dropping it back in. If you do snag, try bouncing your rod up and down to try and work the jig loose. If this isn't working, change the angle to see if you can work it out from another direction. If all else fails, point your rod tip at the snag, hold the reel, and pull slowly until you feel a pop. If your line-to-line knot is good, you should be able to get your leader back too. I like this question's focus on the ecosystem because recently I went to an aquarium in California and they had a little placard that showed how fishing line can take up to 600 years to decompose. It's up to us as anglers to reduce the amount of line in the water as possible to help protect our local waters.
Well, that was my last 3/4 ounce jig that I immediately snagged. So we're back to the half ounce. All right, it's a good fish. Let's see if he keeps. He might. All right, that's a keeper right there. Debating whether I want to keep it. I might throw her back, try to get a bigger size. So one last look. Yeah, I think I'm gonna throw it back. Hopefully this is not a mistake. All right, hopefully we get some good karma on that release. Maybe we'll get a fish that's a little bit bigger. It's definitely a good one though. Good fight.
What size weight for rigs or jigs depending on the conditions? For rigs, I like to start with a 2-ounce bank sinker and see how it holds. If it's struggling to hold and the tide is ripping, then you can go up in weight. Depending on what your rod can handle and how fast the current is, you can go up to a 3 or 4 or even 6 ounce. However, I find that 2 ounce is typically good enough to hold close to the rocks. For jigs, if you're using light line, you're able to cut through the current a little better. I'll start with a half-ounce jig and then potentially go up to a 1-ounce jig if need be. Sometimes up to a 2 ounce will be necessary, but again, if you're fishing tight to the rocks, a half-ounce to 1 ounce should be sufficient.
After this fish, out of nowhere, the wind kicked up dramatically. I decided to throw on a 1-ounce jig to hold bottom a little better. Here we go, here's another fish. The wind was blowing everything around and I happened to turn around right when my bucket blew over, throwing all my stuff out of it. Could have lost a lot of stuff here in the rocks, so I'm grateful I was able to catch it. That was stressful. Once this wind picked up though, it's been, the bite has been ferocious. And of course I'm starting to run out of crabs.
Green crabs versus sand fleas, and which one wins? I wasn't able to get my hands on sand fleas this weekend to try out a little experiment, but to answer your question, both are very, very effective. With sand fleas, you have the potential during certain times of year to get different species as bycatch, and they're a little easier to throw on the hook one after the other versus having to cut up a bunch of green crabs. On the other hand, green crabs may last a little longer in the water from fish tearing off the bait. However, if you're out on the rocks and you can get both, great, but if not, these two baits are extremely effective and will catch you a lot of tod. Fishing is kind of like gambling in that you take a chance that you'll catch a bigger fish, and sometimes you don't, and the risk was not worth it. Or sometimes you do catch a bigger one, and the risk was worth the reward, but you never know what will happen.
Well, that was my last crab. Used it on a little fish. No keeper since that one, but at least we got a keeper for the day. Whoop. There he goes.
This wind really picked up right now. It's actually shaking my car, so I'm kind of glad I left when I did. Did I manage to catch another keeper? No, I didn't. Did we get out there and have some fun? Yes, we did. My motto that I try to follow with fishing is getting out there is the most important thing. Catching fish is just a bonus. Anyway, yeah, we had fun. Let's go to the outro. Just as a little announcement, the fall apparel line is officially out on my website, saltysalmonfishing.com. We've got some heavy duty long sleeve t-shirts. We've got sweatshirts, hats, beanies, and coffee mugs. If you want to go check that out, link will be in the description, and maybe you'll find something to commemorate your fall run. As always, I hope you learned something new with this video, and I hope that I was able to answer your Tog related questions. Let me know in the comments how you've been doing with Tog fishing this season. I appreciate you watching. Thank you for the support, and I'll catch you on the next one.